Hump day, happy hump day. This is your girl Simona with Marijuana Matters. What I always like to say is Marijuana Matters is not only an organizational name, but it is a statement. It is what we believe. We are an organization that really prides ourselves in believing that social equity should be at the cornerstone of all cannabis policy and cannabis practice. We do this a couple different ways, be it through education, advocacy, and entrepreneurship training. Today we have very special treat for you. It's been a while since we've done one of these long form YouTube conversations, but I'm excited because today we have the pleasure and privilege to have this conversation moderated by a very dynamic sister, a sister who I hope we will stay in good company, in good community with, who's in the space really doing the work, right? And making sure that folks understand that cannabis is a tool, it is a resource, and it is something that we can use in our everyday lives. So today's conversation, if you are watching it live or on the replay, it's about how dad's mental health matters. So without further ado, for today's conversation, I'm going to pull up Kevnisha Boyd, who will be moderating today's conversation. Welcome.
Thank you, Simona. It is a pleasure to be here. Like you said, happy Wednesday, happy June. We are celebrating men's mental health. We celebrated Father's Day. We celebrated Juneteenth. So this
Didn't
is
we?
a really important conversation for us to be having in regards to Black dads' mental health, because dads' mental health do matter, and Black fathers are the foundation of the community. And I'm really glad to be here. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce some wonderful panelists, and I am very honored to be holding space with these two gentlemen. They are doing amazing work in the cannabis industry, and I know that the audience is going to have a treat and a lot to learn. So,
Yes.
first, I'd like to introduce Mr. Ernest Tony. So, in less than 3 years, Ernest has developed BIPOC Can into a recognized brand known for the impacts it has made for BIPOC cannabis entrepreneurs and social equity businesses. The organization includes a business membership network that has served more than 70 cannabis supporting services businesses in the US. The consulting and project management arm of BIPOC Can helps public, private, and government entities achieve diversity, equity, and inclusion goals in the cannabis industry. Prior to BIPOC Can, Ernest has managed global marketing and partnerships at Marijuana Business Daily. There, he expanded the company's industry partnerships, global newsletter readership, and event marketing presence in the United States, Latin America, and Europe. So go ahead, Ernest. We are happy to have you today. So, and our next panelist is Mr. Corey C.K. Dunson. CK is a personal trainer, founder of the Bouquet Rolling Papers. CK Dunson is the founder of Bouquet Rolling Papers, a company founded in Washington, D.C., a graduate of the University of Georgia, and former college athlete. He was first introduced to the benefits of cannabis after suffering a series of injuries from sports. Informed by that experience and that of others, CK set out to work in the cannabis industry. After facing rejection from more established businesses in the industry, CK decided to do his own thing to prove that with a strong vision, ingenuity, mixed with the right hustle, you could be successful. So it is an honor to have you, Ernest. It is an honor to have you, CK. And I am pleased to be able to moderate this conversation again as we talk about dad's mental health. So, this conversation, we're going to talk about why mental health is important for Black fathers. We're going to also identify how cannabis can be incorporated into wellness routines to help Black fathers sustain holistic health and balance. We're going to provide some resources, and we're going to have a good time because that's what we do. That is what we do. So, without further delay, I want to pose my first question to you guys. So, my first question is, what are the unique challenges faced by Black fathers when it comes to managing their mental health, and how have you overcome some of these challenges?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool.
So, Ernest, you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we're not a monolith. Everybody's going to have their own challenges that they're dealing with. But when I sort of think about, I can speak for myself, being a father, got a 7-year-old boy, and only child, single dad. So it's like you have a lot of time where you're trying to um, make sure that he's getting all the attention that you need. But you always hear about how you know um, you got to make sure that you are taking care of yourself too, so that you can be present. You can be available, and that can be challenging. When you throw entrepreneurship, especially within the cannabis industry, on top of that, because you're dealing with just a lot of stress and uncertainty. And I think that it's important, as a father, that you try to show, confidence and strength in how you show up, because your kids are going to be looking at you and modeling their behaviors, and they learn what you teach them, so the mental health is going to be important to manage because um, it gets real easy to sort of think about what it is that you're focusing on or what you haven't done, or hey, like, okay, sales are down. We got to figure out how we can, do this. How can we continue to show up to help our people live the mission? And it's just a lot of different things that you're managing. But as a father, you got to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And I know we're going to get into a lot of different strategies to help with mental health, but I'll start it that way. We have a lot thrown at us, and we got to figure out how to navigate everything and still and so that we can be present to help others.
Yeah, yeah. I resonated a great deal with what you said, but what stood out the most was I love how you framed and you already destigmatized the thought of prioritizing oneself, right? Because we can't take care of our family and the people that we love or do advocacy work in terms of the work that we do for the community if we're not well, right? And I think prior generations didn't have a privilege to take care of themselves. So even in honor of Juneteenth and all the sacrifices that our ancestors have made for us to be able to say, well, I am going to prioritize myself, and then have the freedom to choose whatever that looks like. So I love that you said that. What about you, CK? We can't hear you. Bear with us. It's probably the headphones. Bear with us. It's probably the headphones. Bear with us. It's probably the headphones.
What about now? Wow. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes, it's all good.
All right, cool. I think something's going on with my laptop audio, but we back in here. Some of the things that unique challenges I think Black fathers face when it comes to the mental health is just perception and understanding, and maybe understanding the problems that we may go through. Um, I think that sometimes what is mental health and what is a release for certain people or even certain groups of population are not the same as what it may be for other groups of population. So um, I think there's all kinds of forms of therapy and therapy for mental health, but it's just understanding that there might be other options for you that are not necessarily pushed in the mainstream media that are will allow you to get the release that you need or the help that you need or the therapy that you need. For me personally, um, the way that I get my release is through working out. It is through talking with maybe other groups of fathers who are older than me who might be able to give me some guidance. It may be, just listening to music. That for me, that's that creating that space for me to kind of sit down and be with myself, be with my emotions, and to kind of feel through. So I don't think that we necessarily have explored Black fathers, all the different ways that we may receive care. And I think that's just one of us, just, understanding that there's a whole bunch of different outlets for us to receive our mental health. And then, like I said, just not knowing other people, not knowing the stresses that we may have to deal with in terms of like being protectors. Sometimes Black fathers may be scared, they may be not feeling confident, but people might not see that, and they might not understand the weight that you're carrying just because of like your physical presence and everything.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. And so I heard you mentioned the stigma of mental health and what it could look like.
Hmm.
So how do you guys feel the stigma of mental health in the Black community impedes on Black fathers' ability to actually seek help?
You might be seen as weak. You know, some people might not want to be seen as weak. Some people might not want to be a burden to other people by asking for help. So I think that those stigmas, you know, we're supposed to be everybody. We're all strong, right? But we're supposed to be like the like I said, the protectors, the holding it down, anchors. At least that's how I perceive it to be. And I think sometimes when you show chinks in the armor, you may feel a way about yourself. You may feel not as masculine or as manly. So I think those stigmas can prevent or provide roadblocks for certain people getting the help that they need.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think about, growing up in the South, in Virginia, and, um, I feel like I was pretty lucky because I had a lot of uncles. My dad was working all the time, but, he was always like showing up, and he was like this guy that was trying to, project strength. And I think if you go back, you look at his generation, and then, his older brothers, like they were all born, like in his older siblings born in the 50s. Um, if you really just go back a couple of generations, I mean, we're not that far removed from Jim Crow. There was I know that like a lot of the men that were like in my life, that I looked up to were always trying to project strength, and vulnerability was not something that you really got to see. And I would, there are times when I would see, my dad, open up and communicate and be vulnerable, but there's also like a whole lot of times where, I've seen a lot of, Black men, um, um, sometimes it's like, it's what CK was saying. I think there's this, if you don't want to be perceived as weak, like in our community. Um, and I think that, our generation, I feel like we're around a lot more folks who are, um, open to, um, realizing how important it is to take care of yourself, and how getting therapy, getting mental, doing things that are going to take care of your mind so that you can show up in all the ways is not a sign of weakness. Actually, weakness is a sign of strength.
You know what's funny is I actually had a conversation with one of my homies the other day, and we was talking about our fathers, the generation above us, and I was saying like I really appreciate what my father did for me in terms of providing structure, discipline, being I feel like I'm tough and mentally tough and can handle a lot of things because of my dad. But the one thing that what I noticed was like he didn't like necessarily love on me and like say like, you know what, son, I'm proud of you, those type of things like that. And so with my son, that's something that I make sure to add on to it because I know that I like, dang, I would love for my dad to say I'm proud of me and what that would do for my confidence and stuff like that. But my friend made that point was like they grew up in a generation where who knows what they were dealing with, and all of them were kind of raised that way to be like, no weakness, no nonsense, and just straight to it. So I think it's interesting that you brought that up because it's very true.
Yeah, yeah. I hear a reoccurring theme from both of you and even the audience in regards to the generational trauma, in regards
Hmm.
to how we parent and how Black fathers have been able to show up. And I really do feel like a part of the stigma is that Black men don't have a safe space to be vulnerable, right? So we're having these side conversations about vulnerability and the importance of it. But even within the therapy space, there's not a lot of Black male therapists, and Black males aren't always represented in the mental health space. I often find that Black men feel like therapy or any type of mental health isn't for them, whether that be because that's what they've seen in their family or just generally America, right? Therapy is always sometimes looked at like a luxury in this white thing, right? Like, oh, that's what white people do. And it's like, no, it's what people do, right? And I
Hmm.
love what you said, Ernest, about seeking help is actually a sign of strength, right? And then just again connecting back to the generational traumas of having to do it all. Having to do it all and having to do it all by yourself can be extremely overwhelming, and it really does no good for nobody. So, since we're on the topic of parenting, how do you guys view cannabis as being an aid to help Black fathers show up as healthier parents?
You want to go first, Ernest?
Yeah, sure. I can take it. You repeat that question?
Yes.
Right.
How do you feel that cannabis can help Black fathers show up as healthier parents?
I mean, I think that so we were just talking about how important it is to take care of yourself, right? And I know a lot of people, use and consume for a variety of different reasons. And, for some people, especially like if they're getting like the health benefits that they need, whether it's, reducing anxiety or if it's just like helping out with chronic pain or even if it's just like, this helps me, feel, um, I can tell you, like, a lot of times, like, for me, I'm going a mile a minute, like, all the time because I'm juggling so much,
Mhm.
and, you know, I think that, like, when, um, like, whenever like, there are times, like, when I consume and I feel like, um, especially, like, when I'm in periods of just pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, um, I can find myself, like, being very rigid sometimes and just, like, the way I think,
Mhm.
and I see that, carrying through, like, in everything that I'm doing, it's just like, "Go, go, go, achieve," and, then, like, I'll consume, and then it's like, I can be in, like, a different mindset, and I was like, "Okay, this thing that I did, yesterday, this thing that I said, maybe the way that I showed up, around the sun,
Mm,
I start to reflect on that.
Mhm.
And for me, it helps me just like get more connected with my body and my mind, but also being mindful of like
Mhm.
my actions and my intentions and how I show up. And I think that's beneficial because, I try to be like a reflective person and I, and it has been like an aid for me because it helps me get outside of myself and sometimes just slow down a little bit.
Mhm.
And then it's like I can, like, especially like, when you're doing everything related to running a business, it's easy to neglect, some things sometimes. Or maybe it's like, okay, my son's been on the iPad too much, while I'm sitting here on meetings. It's like, okay, Ernest, like, that you need to be showing up. But um, I've seen how like cannabis has been beneficial, for me. Um, but it's also not the only tool that I'm using
Mhm.
in that wellness kit. I'm also exercising and reading, and I have support systems. But I think more than anything, like if you can have if you know how to make sure that because anything can be detrimental if you're doing so much of it that it's taking away from everything else that you're trying to juggle, as a parent, whether that's alcohol or video games. So I just try to be mindful of my use,
Mhm.
and but really those points that I was saying earlier about like how it gets me to just reflect and think about how I'm showing up and how I want to be and how I'm doing as a father. Like that's the value I've seen.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I think for me, cannabis, in my experience, it makes me retrospective. Like I said, I'm highly reflective, and it also makes me sensitive. So when I'm in an environment, like he was saying, I can pick up on things a little bit better, like people's feelings, maybe emotions, um, even how he may be learning. Like the other day, I realized he it's easy to I could teach him how to count 1 through 10 by working out with reps. That's like my method of teaching him how to count. Like, oh, let's do 5 reps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and he's learning that way. But it stuck with me, like I said, because I'm a little bit more sensitive. I'm like, oh, he's receiving this way. This is how he likes to learn. So very similar to what Ernest said. It allows you to slow down, allows you to take a second, allows you, it aids in you being reflective and thinking back on situations. And then, like I said, just being sensitive and really receiving what he's trying to communicate to me. That's how I think the ways that cannabis has personally helped me become a better father.
Yeah, yeah. I hear you guys highlighting how important it is to use cannabis intentionally and to know
Yes.
why you're using it. So, in what ways have you seen cannabis be harmful or detrimental to one's health?
When it's used as a crutch, I think like when you don't when you're using it to run away from the issue or not necessarily address a bigger issue or it's just to sometimes it is good to escape, right? Sometimes it's good to step away, be out of a space that's not good for you. But if you're always doing that, if you're always escaping, then not only you're not going to address the core root of the problem, but now you're being dependent on something versus using it as a tool. So I think that could be a negative thing. And then also just education. Like if you don't know where your cannabis is being grown, how it's being grown, I think anything that's being produced, you should know who is growing it, how it's being grown, because ultimately you're consuming that, you're putting that into your body. And I truly believe everything that you eat, everything that you consume, you are physically, mentally, and spiritually. So if you don't know how it's being grown, I think if it's being grown for the sake of greed and making money, then that cannabis could be detrimental to you. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So just really understanding where you're getting your stuff from and then being intentional with it.
Yeah, 100. Like I agree with that. You know, I'll say like another way is if you just think about the stigma, and also if you think about
Mm,
how cannabis has been a tool to target and put Black fathers,
hmm
behind bars.
hmm
I mean, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of Black men out there, a lot of Black fathers that could use cannabis, and it could actually better them because it can um, be a better alternative than some of the other ways that they may be using to to try to heal themselves. But they may not even give it a chance, or maybe terrified because of all the stigma that's been out there, right? And if you think about how, with it literally being a tool, you have people that might be thinking, okay, cannabis is bad. This is wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. And then that generational trauma, continues and continues. So I'm happy we're having these conversations too about
hmm
challenging the stigma because there's also real, systemic challenges that have directly affected Black fathers because um, just because of everything we talked about, like with how we have been the people that have been most targeted and incarcerated, and then the families are broken up. So, um, I grew up in a small town that was very poor, and when I was like 5 years old, they brought the correctional facility to town. My father started working there close to 20, 25 years. I pretty much grew up in the jail, and we had family members who were locked up. He had older siblings who were in the jail for cannabis. So you're growing up in a community and you're sort of shunned. And it's like, well, I have uncles who aren't at home because they're locked up.
hmm
You know, so that's also a mental health,
Yeah.
conversation.
That can like I feel like sometimes too, even with that, it gives me anxiety, right? Like um letting people know that you use cannabis, even like putting it on my social media, that all that stuff can cause anxiety, which is like you said, could be detrimental to your mental health and all that. So just the being associated with cannabis, yeah, can
Mhm.
cause some issues. That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah. I see that a lot. And Ernest, I really appreciate the way that you framed cannabis in terms as being a method to harm reduction, right? And as we're like talking about therapy, in my experience, I find a lot of Black men don't want to get in therapy because the fear of being prescribed like Western psychiatric medication. And then when
hmm
they learn that, well, cannabis is medicine and you actually can use cannabis to treat your mental health intentionally, and that can become harm reducing in comparison to some really like addictive and harmful other medicines that a lot of doctors try to prescribe. So I do see that in the mental health field myself, and I think that it alleviates a lot of people's stress about getting help, right? Because now it's like, okay, well, I can choose the medicine that I want to use to treat my mental health in the way that I want. So as we're talking about not overusing and or overdosing on cannabis, let's talk about some other tools. So what other tools do you guys use to help manage your mental health as entrepreneurs and fathers? CK, you want to go first? Go ahead.
Sure. Some of the tools that I use, like I said earlier, definitely exercising and working out. Um, it first of all, all the hormone releases and all the good endorphins that get released is great for your mental health. Two, your confidence is going to rise. Three, you feel accomplished. I love to work out in the morning just to kind of set the tone for the day. I try to knock it out, and then I'm pretty much bulletproof for the rest of the day. Any of the BS that might come my way, I'm already making steps to having a great day. So working out and exercising is definitely one way. Two is your support system and your family, man. Just love and laughter. Not even have to worry about anything business related. Nobody wanting something from me. Just genuine people who care about you, who will love for you, and show their love for you in different ways. So I try to surround myself with family and friends and just have a good time and laugh. And then, thirdly, some of the things that I like to do, like I said, is just like music or just like long drives. I feel like long drives, like on a long stretch of road, I start thinking, you know what I'm saying? Some of my best ideas come from like just those long drives and just like thoughts coming to me and just being able to separate and escape. I'm also in the city too. With the city, there's a lot of stuff going on, and you're picking up a lot of things that are like you don't even realize that you're picking up. So just like even getting outside the city, traveling, changing the scenery, and just really repotting yourself in different situations. I feel like for me are great ways that I revitalize myself and energize myself and pour back into myself. And another one is just massages and like yoga and things like that. I feel like those are all things that I use in my toolkit to kind of just keep me in balance.
Well, go ahead to yoga. How'd you get into yoga, CK? That's interesting because that's also
Yeah.
another space I think a lot of black men feel a little fearful of.
Yeah, so I actually host a yoga class with Whitley from the Healing Bar with Benson Bouquets, and that's one of the things that I've been really making an important thing is getting more men into the yoga space. Um, how I got into was actually through football. So I played football at the University of Georgia, and terrible like just injuries,
Mm.
concussions, shoulder, frozen shoulder, and all that um, fractured ankles. But I feel like yoga was the one thing that helped me recover back into my like bring me my physical injuries back up to par. And I didn't have to wear like knee braces or ankle braces anymore. I actually came back stronger. But what I realized was it's like I said, it's all about balance. Football, basketball, all those sports are very, very violent sports, right? You need something to kind of help balance out on the opposite end, the violent nature of those sports. And yoga is one of those movements where you're moving, you're flowing, it's peaceful, it's all about the breath. It's a lot about balance, and you work a lot of the intrinsic muscles that you just necessarily don't work out when you're like in the gym. So I'm an athlete. I'm really sensitive about my body, and once I made that connection and saw like, oh, I'm stronger, faster, better. I can perform better. I stuck with it. But it's just interesting to see, guys who don't want to get into it or like who don't necessarily understand it, don't necessarily understand how the breath is connected to all the movements and things like that. So I've been really, really, really trying to like just bring guys out. I'll give them free tickets. I'm like, look, man, just come try it out. Whitley, she's great. She's going to guide you. And we also do meditations at the end of the class. And again, it's a time for you to be on pause, sit, stop using your eyes, use your other senses, and just be in the moment. And some of those classes, man, people wake up and you could just see the weight gone from the day to day just by taking a pause. Like people are really going day to day like this, and just like take a time out, man. Breathe. feel what's going on. Check in with your toes. Check in with your fingers. Check in with your heart. Check in with your breath. You probably haven't even thought about doing that yet. Um, so just my own experience, and then just looking and seeing people like being physically changed is like, nah, this is something that I want to add on to outside of me just training people. Like, nah, I'm also going to provide you a space to take a time out, take a breath, and give yourself some balance. So that's how I got into it, and that's how I stay in it now is through the class.
I love that. I love that. That was a word. That was a word. So I'm a yoga teacher myself, and I
Awesome.
find yoga to be the best form of body movement to heal trauma and to really help with mental
Hmm.
health. I usually try to introduce it to a lot of my clients as yoga is a mental exercise that uses the body as a tool. So I love that you talked about the meditation and the self compassion and how to really like quiet the mind. And then you
Hmm.
sprinkle a little cannabis with that, and it really serves as a nice enhancement to help the muscles relax and to just feel
Hmm.
a lot more calmer and relaxed. So, yes,
Hmm.
the yoga. So, shout out to you. Thank you for bringing that up. So, what about you, Ernest?
And CK, you nailed it. Um, nodding my head because a lot of the things you said, I was like, yes, yes. Like, especially for me, I love having those long drives, like whether it's to an
Hmm.
airport or if sometimes if you just have like an hour,
Hmm.
I like that because I'm always like on my phone and always like at the computer, and that's a time where you can just like be quiet and be mindful. And I agree, I get a lot of good thoughts. Whenever I travel to and take a flight, I love that as well because I feel like I get some of the best ideas when I'm removed from the technology.
Hmm.
One of the things that's helped me, in this entrepreneurship um, journey, I started my business July 2020, so it's right around 3 years. And every year I've made a point to have uh, a 2 or 3 day retreat just for me. And that's when I'm away from everybody and I'm just sitting down and I'm getting all of this stuff out of my head onto paper, trying to come up with ideas, trying
Hmm.
to reflect on things that are working, what's not, and how I want to show up, how I want to improve. Um, that's real. That's real important. But on the day to day, exercise very important for me. I'm like a lifelong athlete and runner. I I try to do a couple of races a year,
Hmm.
and it's not even about trying to like qualify or it's about just pushing myself to do something that's hard, whether it's like a half marathon or like some overnight mountain relay race. It's a part of entrepreneurship, is you always have obstacles that you have to face and you don't know when they're coming through, but you have to keep finding ways to push forward. So I think being able to do something that's like physical is also good with that
Hmm.
because you're also testing your mental and like your physical capabilities. Some other ways, other things that I do is, I love listening to music. When I go to the gym, I got a different
Hmm.
playlist. There's some of them
What you
that,
what you
you
listening
know,
to?
I was just about to
well,
ask.
no, 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 no. So when I do like when I do my upper body, when I do my weightlifting, I have this routine that I follow for like the past 3 years whenever I go, and I listen to the same playlist. Sometimes I'll add stuff in it, but it's black men who are saying inspirational words. So I got like Nipsey Hussle in there. I
Okay.
got you know I got some. I got some Rick Ross, stuff in there
Oh,
because no, I have to send you the list because
yeah, share
I
that.
have this, some things that are just gonna like motivate me,
Hmm.
and sometimes like in between sets, like I'll sit there and I'll I'll bring up like the Inc. or the entrepreneurship like app and then I'll read like something that might be relevant to business. So I'm always like trying to figure out
Hmm.
how I can learn, how I can take in and absorb new ideas. I play guitar, so I do that to
Hmm.
just to sometimes that's real great because it's just another creative,
Hmm.
some other creativity that you get to do. Um, and I'm actually starting. So I've done. I don't do yoga on a regular basis, but I do some of like the beach body workouts where you know it's sort of like that program where you can like log in and you have workouts at home that you can access. That's been helpful for me, especially during the winter time when it's a little bit harder to get to the gym and you got your kid at home. So I can just like work out from home. And there's a lot of them that incorporate stretching into the beginning and the end. And that's been good for me because it's something that I always neglected, even when I was, playing sports back in high school and stuff. I tore my Achilles tendon, 6 years ago in 2017 while I was exercising. And I know that it's because I never really prioritized the stretching. And since then, it's been real helpful just to like make sure that I'm doing that on a daily basis. When we chatted last time, I told you that it was during that physical therapy and the recovery when I started to, I noticed that after tearing that Achilles, whenever I would consume, um, it's like I could actually feel, I could feel almost like my mind could sort of feel like the repairing and the healing, attendance. It's real weird because I couldn't feel that mind body, connection, when I wasn't consuming. So
I love the emphasis on the healing of the mind and the body because I think when we talk about anxiety and just being entrepreneurs and how easy it is to be distracted and how easy it is to not be mindful, is that actually the body does keep the score, right? Like the body holds the stress, the body holds the injury. And when we put an overemphasis just on our minds, it does create a disconnect and an imbalance. So I love the balancing conversation about this holistic health, right? Like not only just mental health, but physical health and how the two intersect. And that is awesome. That is awesome because it also creates, I think, a lot of space for Black fathers to choose how they get their healing, right? Like it doesn't just have to be therapy. It doesn't just have to be cannabis. It can be long drives and it can be working out and it can be yoga and it can be whatever you really need it to be. So I appreciate you guys sharing your experiences. Ernest, you look like you were going to say something. No.
Oh yeah, just one thing. The support system, like you said, CK, is huge. You have to find people that want to see you succeed, and that, but not only that, are there for you regardless of whether or not you succeed. So my circle, like my network has gotten huge, but like my circle, of people that I'm talking to on a daily basis is pretty tight.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next question is how can we ensure equitable access to mental health resources and cannabis education for Black fathers?
I think we lost CK. So.
He'll pop back on like he does.
Yeah, can you say that again? How do we ensure equitable access?
Yep. How can we ensure equitable access to mental health resources and cannabis education for Black fathers?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think that spend a lot of time just like talking about equity within like the business, and the policy landscapes for cannabis. But when you think about mental health, I think it's similar. First is, I think, just like trying to educate people, like really focusing more about like the education, so people understand, hey, like this is why this is important, and also how having working with folks that can really like not only educate but bring those resources, make them available to folks. I think that like a lot of times people might not even know where to begin. Okay, well, I want to improve my mental health, but there's so many different choices. I don't really know what to do. I don't know, if you're dealing with the stigma and worried about what people are going to think about you because some of those conversations we were saying earlier related to like weakness. I think that support systems, education are huge. sure I'll have some other ideas for you. Okay.
No,
What
it is a
what
hard
was the
question.
question?
Yeah, the question is, thanks for coming back. Question is, how can we ensure equitable access to mental health resources and cannabis education for Black fathers?
So, one more time, how can we ensure equitable education?
Yep, access to mental health resources and cannabis education.
I think a lot of times we gotta do the work. I feel like, organizations need to provide talks like this. They need to provide no go affordable help. And so they can journey them. People tend to find their own ways, but a lot of times they don't even know where to start. Same thing it could be with fitness. You just need to start, take them a couple steps, but yeah, just making it easy to understand where you can go to, what might be happening to you, like you said about how the body doesn't forget the score. I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand that or know that. So just even education on that and how the body holds trauma and how to even be aware if you're going through something. I think a lot of times people are not necessarily aware that they are holding on to things or that they're feeling depressed or that they're feeling a certain way. Once you're aware and you can acknowledge that, then it's a lot easier to kind of just to take those steps and to go seek help or go find help or go pull up to a conversation like this to find that way to get the help that you need. Um, and I think it takes uh, just guys having conversations about things that they're going through, um, and knowing that they can go to maybe the OG or their friend for just help, and you letting your friends know that hey, if you need something, bro, like you can come talk to me, you know. And sometimes that's all guys might need. Sometimes it's just a homie letting them know like, hey, you good? You going through something? You need an ear or something? And just people checking in on them and talking to them. So I think those things will help. But how to make it equitable, I'm not 100% sure and all that.
Yeah, yeah. It's a big question. It's a big question,
Yeah.
and I agree with both you said. I like to say that our healing has to be legislated, and what I really mean is like
Mm.
it's got to start at the top. It's got to start at the top, and not that we don't need to be doing the groundwork to create these safe spaces and be having these open, authentic conversations. Because unfortunately, like Black people, we're having to do both, right? Like we're having to fight the system and still heal and do the work and show up and try to create lives of balance and happiness. But I think it's got
Hmm.
to start at the top with changing laws, changing policies, getting old racist white men out of the government, right? So we can have a more
Yeah.
diverse and inclusive government. Because we could talk a lot about like what we need, but if we don't have the to do it, then we're just going to keep having these repetitive conversations. So I love the
Yeah.
work that, Marijuana Matter does in terms of the advocacy change and legislative work, because I think that's where the most change has to happen before it trickles down to some of our communities. Um, so yeah, I appreciate your feedback.
Kevnisha, I agree with you there. And
Yeah. But I
so
would
you're
say even
saying,
even even a lot of people though.
oh, what's up?
We can hear you, CK.
May have lost him for a second.
Okay.
Um, I'll chime in. I agree with you there. There's a lot of states that are still coming online and like creating um, that are well, actually, in a lot of the places where we're seeing the social equity
Oh
conversations happen,
no, I'm
a lot
listening.
of times the
I,
legislation.
I heard him talking, so I
Um,
stopped talking.
I think okay, all right. I think a lot of times in some of these new places where you're seeing like conversations with cannabis and social equity, it is almost entirely focusing on like the business opportunities And while that is something that's great, like if these programs actually work and people, like Black folks and other people of color who have had their lives ruined, can actually get a piece of that pie because they're able to start a business and make it thrive. Like that's great. But I think what's also missing is like the health equity conversations with that too. And to your point, I could see how valuable that would be if you're having these new states saying, all right, when we pass this legislation, we're going to make sure that there's education and resources available to support people, because while this can also be something that generates a lot of wealth, it's medicine, and I feel like a lot of that focus has been lost like in recent years. Um, and and that needs to change for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. Heavy on the cannabis is medicine. It is medicine, and it needs to be treated as such. And I guess I would say this is a good segue in terms of the next question, which is what policy changes and/or initiatives should be implemented to better support Black fathers' mental health needs and the intersection of cannabis. So what policy changes or initiatives? I feel like Ernest, this is your jam.
I was going to say, CK wanted to take.
I know you, Ernest. You mentioned a lot of stuff earlier, just in terms of how cannabis was used as a tool to incarcerate Black men and things like that. So I think just things on, I think like economically, there could be some things that could be systematically changed that'll help Black fathers, and also in terms of just the um, policing system, and how we're policed, or just things, the war on drugs and things like that. Will those specific laws and doing things in that area will have positive effects on Black fathers.
Yeah, we can't hear you. We went out.
I went out.
Yeah, towards the end.
Oh man. But I was just saying, basically economically and with the policing, I feel like there's we can change certain frameworks and laws that'll benefit, Black fathers and their mental health and all of that. So I'm not sure like what specifically needs to be changed, but we could start by just saying we could legalize cannabis on a federal level, um, and expungement clinics to help clean up people's records that might have prevented them from getting certain jobs, certain positions that might have again affected them economically. So just doing things like that, I think, will help with that in that area.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to follow your lead in terms of mass incarceration. One policy change I think that should have happened 10 years ago was if they were going to have dispensaries and legalize marijuana, then incarcerated people should have been freed, right?
Yeah.
And I think the first thing we really need to do is decarcerate people that have been incarcerated for cannabis possession and or distribution. And I think that we know that Black men are disproportionately incarcerated, and that would then put a lot of Black fathers back in the home, and that would restore the Black family, which then can help us to start to shift some of the generational traumas that the Black community does have. So I agree with you that should be first. They're making billions of dollars while people are incarcerated for the very same plant.
Hmm.
And I think it's disgusting and it's a disgrace. That is just in our face, right? Like we were watching y'all do this. And it's definitely impacting our community directly. And it's sad. It's sad. So Ernest, the question was what policy changes or initiatives could be implemented to better support Black fathers' mental health needs, considering cannabis use?
I got you. Yeah, I agree with what both of you said. For sure, yes, decarcerating people, because right now we're perpetuating the harm. There's still so many Black fathers that are locked up. It's the same thing that people in this industry is making, $30 billion a year or more off of. And for every day that, people continue to sit behind bars, and that gap, continues. All right. So the person's able to get out of, you know, um, jail or prison, and there's not a whole lot of reentry services that are available. And for someone that may have spent, decades of their lives like behind bars, I think I was reading something. I think I saw a post sometime recently that was talking about how, like after the pandemic, well, after the first year of the pandemic, when people started to return, back to society, and being in social situations, how awkward it was and how difficult it was, and how all these adjustments had to happen. Because guess what? We couldn't be immersed in a society where we just do things as usual for a year. Now, imagine somebody that's been behind bars for 20 years that
Hmm.
like they missed so much, and there's not resources and tools that are prepared to help them. And I'd be pissed if I if I came out of jail and I want to go and get a job at like a dispensary and I can't because I have a record, like while somebody is just collecting like all this cash at the top. So that needs to happen. The next thing I would say is even before legalization, it needs to be decriminalized and descheduled. I think
Yeah.
the first thing we need to do is stop the harm, because people are still getting convictions and incarcerated for this in places all across the country right now. And we know that black men are the most like or targeted and affected like more likely than others. Then it's easy to assume that w- we're going to be the people that continue to
Mhm.
um, have that harm inflicted upon us. Um, so I know, I'm in a lot of these conversations, paying attention to like the policy landscapes, and how if like say banking passes, how that could be helpful, or if legalization happens. But at the end of the day, like um, we need to decriminalize, and there needs to be real effort to ensure that we can help people. Um, when I grew up, I had no idea that I was going to be in the cannabis industry. I mean, there was no industry, um, 10 years ago, but I'm not surprised now when I look back and think about why I got here. Because I mentioned earlier how my father was working at the correctional facility. So I would go from school to the jail. I knew the people that worked there. They were like family. The people who were locked up were like family too. Some were neighbors, some were friends. And then I got to see, that was like my life, like understanding how a jail works and seeing how certain people that live in certain, certain streets are the ones that are going there, whereas your friends in the suburbs are not. Um, and then my mom worked in social services, so she was the person that would immediately like work with people once they left the jail, and that was also interesting to learn, because she was in a position that was, my dad. I'd come home and she'd say, you know, you're dealing with all these people behind bars, but you better be nice to them, because they first thing they do is come to
Mhm.
me, and asking for things, and it's interesting. I don't think that people really understand uh, how um, that relationship, and how it is important for organizations, or definitely you still are going to need to have the actors like on the local and the grassroots level to be able to provide expungement services or reentry, or they like the 40 tons group. They just had that cannabis careers fair up in
Mm.
Chicago. These are folks that are going to communities across the country and saying, we want to provide you with a headshot, we want to provide you with resume, training, we want to provide you with networking so that we can help you beat that bridge from incarceration to job creation, or starting a business, or like we need all of that. But at the policy level, there needs to be some real intention about how there needs to be more of a focus on decarceration, decriminalizing, and providing services that can help, people that have been directly impacted by the war on drugs for the past 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, yeah. That was a word. I feel like we need to do a whole nother show just on cannabis and incarceration in the criminal justice system. So there's one comment that stood out to me that I want to read from the audience from Zeus. So he says, I think taking the funding that they gave the war on drugs and allocating that for programs that help target the same people. And I'm a yes, yes, yes to that, Zeus, right? And that's just reinvesting the money. And I can't speak for nationally, but I know in Connecticut, they are not doing a great job of that in terms of taking the money that the billions of dollars that the dispensaries are making and reinvesting it in the community. And whether that's because the Social Equity Council is not doing what they're doing or just America's being America, right? And not wanting to do the right thing. So I appreciate that comment. So, I mean, I hate that we're running out of time. We got a few more minutes left, so I want to kind of bring things to a close. And so I'd love to hear some either cannabis resources or mental health resources that you guys can provide to the audience. So I'll share some. So there's a national organization called BEAM, and it stands for Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective. And then for anybody who wants therapy, as we're talking about Black fathers, there is a mental health directory specifically for Black men, and it's called therapyforblackmen.org. So if there's anybody who's looking for a Black therapist or somebody that specializes in treating Black men, it's www.therapyforblackmen.org. And there's a similar mental health therapy directory, and that is www.cliniciansofcolor.org. So again, you can go in there, choose your state, pick your insurance, and then be able to find a therapist that specializes in working with the Black population. So I'd love to hear any resources that you guys have for mental health and or cannabis education or services.
Yeah, cannabis education. I think we talked on the ones that I'm most familiar with and can vouch for the most, which is Marijuana Matters, and 40 Tons. I've worked with both organizations. I've seen firsthand the impact that they've had and the impact that people who have attended their events have received, specifically when it comes to like cannabis and cannabis career, cannabis education, and then like I said, getting your records expunged, getting your headshots, and just entering in the space professionally, and figuring out how to maneuver there. Um, Outside of that, I would just say, like I said, the gym is a great resource for for mental health. 10 minutes a day on the treadmill, on the stairmaster, breaking a sweat. I feel like once you break a sweat, um, you're going to be in a good space. So a lot of times people think you need a lot of money to be healthy or not, but really all you can go outside and create a great workout. You can go for a walk, you can walk the stairs, you can go for a run. If you have dogs, go with your dogs outside, go for nice walks. But a lot of things that you need, they can be free. You don't need the most advanced, the most technological thing to get what you need. A lot of things that you need are free and available to you. You just gotta have faith and do the work.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's great. No, I agree with everything y'all said. I was gonna say Marijuana Matters. Y'all have been great. Like I said, 40 Tons. There's a lot of other nations all across the country that provide like resources. I know like Roz at M4MM, Minorities for Medical Marijuana. She's built something great, and I know they even have like a monthly segment that has to do with health and wellness. So like I've seen them like really try to touch on a lot of different, areas that support our community. It's not just about business ownership. But I would recommend them. And yeah, that's like what CK said, really anything that you can do to take care of your mind and body. Yeah, exercising, eating right, happy to put also our information, contact information in the thread if that's helpful.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to reach out and just like wants to have like a deeper conversation, I'm happy to, do that, and also like make some referrals to people if they're looking for resources. So
I will say I didn't touch on one thing also, specifically being a personal trainer. Nutrition is very important.
Mhm.
What you eat can really affect your mood and your mindset. So eating things that come from the earth that are grown are really I feel like are really beneficial to your mental state of being. And with that being said, I also believe that the practice of detoxing is really important as well. Understanding how to come back down to a baseline. So last year, I did I did different challenges, but one of the challenges was a detox and different diets just to see like if I remove chicken from my diet, how do I feel? If I
Mm,
remove cannabis from my diet, how do I feel? How do I think? I think always being able to come back to a state of zero and understanding how different things affect you is really, really important. So I believe in, nutrition, and then, like I said, doing detoxes every now and then just to see, like, all right, this might have been affecting me, but I wouldn't have known if I wouldn't have removed it and brought it back in. So,
you know what,
yeah.
CK, I don't know how we both missed how we missed that. But I'm glad you said that too, man. Not to steal your thunder. Yes, 100%. Every year, I always start January, doing dry January. I will not have
Hmm.
alcohol. Sometimes like I'll take that all the way into, March. Usually my birthday's in March, so that always sort of messes things up for me. But but no, that's important. My partner, she's a health and wellness coach. I've been sort of fortunate because I have, access to, trying a lot of different challenges and things like that. And he's been vegan for like 3 years, and I've noticed that that has had a effect on some of the choices that I make for food. So I eat um, I eat less meat products or less animal products than I did over the in the previous 3 or 4 years. But I've noticed a change there too. Just being intentional about like the types of food that you're putting into your body makes it affects everything that you do.
yeah, that was good. I got one more question. So since we're talking about like detoxing and taking breaks, how do you guys feel about like herbal holidays or taking a tolerance break from cannabis and how that can impact one's mental health?
Having understanding that you can have control, right? I think working that muscle, how it's a muscle, right? So how can you work it? How can you work your discipline? If you say you're going to do something, do it. So I do it periodically. Sometimes it may be a week. Sometimes it may be like, hey, after, I'm not going to consume anything until after 7 p.m. That'll be my challenge. Or it might be a whole month leading up to my birthday, kind of like what Ernest said. So I think doing those things is really important because it shows you that you don't have an addiction to anything or a routine, and B, it's just working that muscle of being disciplined and being aware and being sensitive to your body. So I think, yeah, I try to do it several times throughout the year at different lengths.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have a necessarily like a routine, but I have noticed something that has changed since I started in business. Because if I go back to 20 if I go back to like 18, 2019, I mean, I was smoking about it, on a daily basis. But when I started my business, like, um, I, that definitely changed because I felt like I needed to make sure that I could be present, through basically like when other people are present, you're trying to have conversations with other people. And it's like, um, and I noticed that like my intake has drastically decreased. The other thing is as my um, son has like gotten older, and especially like during the summer times, like when he's away from school and you have more of that one-on-one, I'm outside and I'm a lot more active. So like my intake, I noticed like during the summer is usually a lot less, especially like when maybe it's like after he goes to bed or when I go out to cannabis conferences, that's I do that pretty regularly, so I always have that chance to connect with people, and it's in a lot of ways it's also become more of a social thing for me too, because I've tried to put guardrails around, like, okay, this time is protected for business, this is protected for exercise, this is protected for playing with my kid and stuff like that. So
Yeah, yeah. I love what you said about after the break, you find sometimes that you're using less of it. And that's been my experience as an educator, where clients will take a break and then they're able to observe that maybe their symptoms aren't as intense as before when they needed to use a lot of it. So I know we had the
Hmm.
conversation about like overusing and misusing. And I find that the herbal holiday and the tolerance breaks are a good way to make that assessment of, oh, actually, I'm sleeping better, so I don't need to use as much. And I
Yeah.
think that's how we make it more responsible and safer, and we honor it as the medicine that it is. So this has been an amazing conversation, amazing conversation. So I want to
Can
check
I
in with the audience. Go ahead, sorry.
can I actually ask you one question? I wanted to ask you earlier, but obviously I was having those connection issues.
Of
You
course.
asked us what did we do to kind of that we do for therapy and things like that. I wanted to know from you. From first of all, do you have a lot of male clients that you see at your
I,
practice?
yeah, we see about maybe like 25% men.
Okay, and so from that, have you come across anything that they did that was beneficial for their therapy, just from the experiences that you've had with them?
Yeah, I find that the most impactful tool that the men that I've worked with is actually meditation. And
Okay.
so, because we can't heal what we don't feel, right? And a lot of times there's a lack of awareness, whether it be the mind or the body, right? Because we're just going, going, going. And when clients meditate, what they also do is learn how to talk to themselves nicer, right? A lot of people have this really harmful, judgmental inner critic, inner voice. And when you do a guided meditation, you actually learn a softer, more gentler language, right? And how not to be so harsh on yourself. So I will say the men that I work with mostly have benefited from meditation. And it was something that you said about like it's free, right? Like you don't need somebody to meditate with. You don't need a tool. You don't really need technology. Just you, yourself, your breath, and however you choose to facilitate that meditation. So that was a good question. Yeah, thank you. So in the audience, do we have any questions from anybody before we close out? Going once, going. Okay. I don't see anything because it was everything. It was everything that it needed to be. I really appreciate all the information. I love the vulnerability and how open you guys were relative to your histories, how you got in the cannabis industry, and all of that. Okay, so I see one. So, any tips for handling grief? Ooh, that's a good one. Good question. So I don't mind starting off. So, something that I teach my clients is to not avoid the grief, but to sit in it and to find a way to honor that person that has transitioned. So some of those things can really lean more towards like a more spiritual realm. And sometimes that might look like lighting a candle, right? Or sometimes that might look like wearing the loved one's favorite color, or sometimes something that my clients really like is they build a plant, like so they make a plant and then they write the loved one's name on the plant box, and then that serves as a way to honor the transition that no, the physical body of this person has left, but not necessarily the spiritual part. So that's how I would say that is to find a way to honor rather than just kind of like out of sight, out of mind as if it didn't happen. But how can I honor the transition in a more accepting and loving way? So, what about you guys? Any tips for handling grief?
I would say give yourself time. Be patient with yourself and give yourself time. And then also with that, with the grief that I have been through, I always try to find the learning lesson uh, in it, whatever the situation may be. There's probably some sort of learning, or it doesn't even have to necessarily be a learning lesson, but if there is, try to see what that is and use that to positively affect your life. So for example, I had a cousin, really close cousin. He died of cancer when he was like 15, 16. That struck me hard. It's probably like the first major death that I've had in my life. But from there, I think it was one of the major one of the major factors that got me to go on this health journey that I'm on. I've had time to reflect back on like maybe the food choices that they were eating, the lifestyle that my cousin was necessarily leading that led to him. Because things don't necessarily just happen. There's a reason why things happen. And so understanding why some things might have happened and then using that as a learning tool to better my life. But like I said, also giving myself the time to just acknowledge that I'm going through grief, and then it's going to take there's going to be a time where I not necessarily get over it, but I have come to accept and I'm able to process everything. So I think just being patient with yourself and just learning from whatever it may be, whatever's causing the grief.
Yes, similar note. I just try to like tell myself or encourage other people to just allow yourself to feel the feelings, because I think a lot of times we're all like, hey, how can I be happy? How can I be happy? But it's like, I also think about like sort of how um, if you've experienced happiness and you've experienced sadness, right? Then you know what both of those feel like, and grief, like any other feeling, is that, and it's and I don't think that's necessarily like a bad thing, but more than anything, it's like you just allow your body to feel it, and then try to also figure out like the learnings and the insights that you can get from it, um, and then figure out how you can be stronger with that. And that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. Thank you. Thank you for that. Well, in conclusion, I appreciate your time. I know we went over. This has been amazing, and I hope that this is not the end of our relationship. Last thing, please let everybody know where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, so you can find me where my business is BIPOCAN, BIPOCANN, and we post regularly on like Instagram and Facebook. If you want to find me on LinkedIn, you can just search for Ernest Toney, Toney, and yeah, send a request. I'll get back to you.
You can find my personal page on IG at C.2, the number 2, THE.K. And then you can find our business page at Rolling, that's ROLLING _ bouquets. That's BOUQES. So that's the two places that you can find me on social.
Okay, thank you. So you can find me on Instagram at Kevinisha _ LPC. And it has been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. So I appreciate you all for coming out, and I hope to connect soon.
Awesome. Thank you guys for your patience.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.